Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Green Room here with DisrupTV. And of course, we're here with my amazing co-host, co-founder, Vala Afshar. And of course, we got our guests. So we'll be interviewing our guests as we usually do. We ask them what we're talking about today. And of course, we do it in the reverse order of appearance. So Elliot, welcome to the show. What are we talking about today?
Great
Where
to
are
be
you coming
here.
in from?
I'm currently in Phoenix, Arizona. Normally live in Indianapolis. I'll be talking today about my new book, The Illusion of Innovation, why innovation is getting harder inside of large organizations and what to do about it.
Oh, it's a great question. And organizations are getting larger and larger. So this is a very, very tough problem. Beth, welcome to the show. What are we talking about today?
Hi, I'm Beth Rudden, coming to you from Denver, Colorado, and talking about AI for the rest of us and how AI can be used as a practical tool when it's actually explainable AI.
Very, very good points. And of course, one of the hottest topics of the year, probably of the decade. So very, very cool. Well, with that, we're going to kick off our show. And of course, we'll see you in a little bit and we'll start now. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see this guy on TV every day, Bloomberg, Fox Business, Yahoo Finance. He's everywhere. In my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. And here's my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar. And you also know he's the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce, but he's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless. This is an amazing book. If you think about flow, it's a new mindset for unlimited business success and a #1 seller on Amazon. Executives around the world always pay attention to every one of his inspirational, insightful tweets. And when he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg and posting insightful analyses on ZDNet. More importantly, it's not about us. It's always about our guests. And who do we have to kick it off today?
It's our privilege to have an extraordinary CEO on our show, Beth Rudden, CEO of Bast.ai, and author of AI for the Rest of Us. A global executive leader with 20 plus years of IT and data science experience at IBM. Beth apparently joined IBM when she was 5. Beth led teams and produced patented solutions that turned innovation and customer-focused problem-solving solutions into a $2 billion business, Ray. $2 billion business. Beth sat on IBM's Academy of Technology Technical Council, ran Invention, Disclosure, and Promotion Board, served on an AI Executive Open Source Board, and IBM's Corporate Global Data Science Board, as well as many other technology-related boards. Ray, listen to this. Beth has 40 U.S. patents.
Wow.
I have 4. So, man,
I have 0. So
talk about imposter syndrome when we have Beth on the show. A few years ago, in 2022, Beth started her corporation, Bast.ai, which creates software that allows everyone to build their own conversational AI technology, working in the intersection of education and healthcare, combining semantic and statistics. Beth believes every human should have an AI protector, and companion. You can follow Beth on X at iBethRudden, Rudden. Welcome, Beth, to Disrupt TV.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I love your introductions. I had to get my book out. It's very cool.
Awesome.
I had to shorten your bio. We only have 20 minutes, and you've done a lot. So thank you for being here.
Well, hey, thanks for being on the show. And actually, we had a question here that we were going to ask you really about power dynamics and what's going on for individuals versus communities, and what's these fears and concerns around AI. But I actually wanted to jump in a little bit deeper into this, and by starting by saying that in the last revolution with the internet, it was open, it was accessible, it was decentralized, and costs went down. And the more and more I study what's happening, this is the opposite. It's closed, it's centralized, and the costs are going up. And the question that we have for you around power structures becomes even more relevant, because the fears and concerns about AI from a societal perception in terms of what's happening and how it's being built, who owns it, the power dynamics, and the individual and communities. I don't think we've talked a lot about that. And your book was prescient about talking about this almost a year ago. A year and a half ago, you were starting to talk about some of these issues. Can you kind of elaborate on these things that we should be thinking about, the policy implications that are ahead of us, and of course, the societal implications of what we call centralized AI or centralized scarcity that we're going to see versus decentralized abundance where humanity wants to go?
There's a really great interview between Steve Altman and Bill Gates. And Bill Gates asks Steve Altman and says, what would it be like for our children to come from a mindset of abundance versus a mindset of scarcity? And it was, very relevant. I'm taking a little bit of a longer view on this. I'm a trained archaeologist and anthropologist. So if you look at the Industrial Revolution, prior to the internet, and I would argue too that the openness of the internet, people forget that it was the teachers all around the world that had to be brave enough to go, sometimes against their government, to put the information on the internet, to make that open. So that didn't happen by chance. That was through a lot of brave professors. And I saw you had Vint Cerf and Malin Fung, and so I just want to make that point, because that's not necessarily where it started. But if you go back to the industrial era, and the bosses were like on top of the workers' floor, literally, so that they could see all the workers on the workers' floor. And one of the Max Weber, who's one of the fathers of sociology, he talks about bureaucratic institutions sort of taking that place so that the manager could see that the workers were doing everything right. And with bureaucracies, there's rules where people are actually adherent to the rules because the rules make sense, and then that perpetuates more bureaucracies. It's sort of like human resources. Bad joke. But I think that, if you think about how businesses are really functioning, and, we had a great conversation in the green room about, large corporate institutions. And I think that not everyone, gets into the right rooms to understand how lots of large corporations are operating. And so this fears about power imbalance, job displacement, lack of diversity, it's actually really influencing regulation and development. And back in 2013, IBM had already started some ethical AI, some responsible AI, some explainable AI, really great people who were just seeing that they didn't want the past codified into our future.
Yeah.
And if you think about the language, and this is what all this generative AI is all about, is the language version of machine learning and deep learning, not just the numeric, linear algebra portion. And the language of corporations and corporate, bureaucracies are changing. They have to change. Human beings are no longer cost, resource, headcount. They're not FTEs as much anymore. And this is, part hope, part manifestation, as I say this. But I think that companies have to stop to think about, you cannot manage all the cost out of your business. It's not possible. And so when you start adding in the business impacts of artificial intelligence and being able to automate a portion of a person's job away, and then you have a CFO who takes their fiscal responsibility very seriously to the company and they initiate a cost reduction or headcount reduction, I think that that tension is going to be much more transparent. Because I think that the people who are going to be automated out of the jobs are much more in that, like I used to call it the calcified middle of a large corporation. And I have to give a prop here. So David Graeber wrote a book called Bullshit Jobs, and the entire premise of the book, and he was an anthropologist, entire premise of the book is that the cognitive dissonance that comes from working for a job that you know is not actually adding value or is giving you a purpose within an organization. And so long story short, the fears are absolutely correct, because we need a distributed understanding of how AI works. And if you have a representative sample of humanity, so a 20% representative sample, that's 1.6 billion people who need to understand how AI works in order for there to be a distributed understanding and a lack of a power imbalance.
You know, that Puritan capitalist work ethic is under assault for self-worth by, evil AI overlords. I'm just kidding. I love his book. His book was amazing.
Yes. And progress is not linear, right?
Progress is not linear.
That is one of my personal favorites. But, if you look at like some real world examples of like AI that is totally reshaping, our lives, as well as any of the associated regulations that's coming about, that it's opening us up to all of these different perspectives. The AI bias in facial recognition and the work that Joy Buolamwini has been doing and has done, and where she's using poetry to get Congress to understand that, this is so stupid. It's nonsensical for a business function to not have, AI that can recognize people of color. I mean, it's just absolutely asinine. And then to have people saying, well, wait a second, maybe we shouldn't, make decisions based on things that can't see, a good portion of the population. So it's so interesting to me that is all finally coming to light. I call this age the age of transparency. It's like the end of opacity. And it's because everyone from the mailroom all the way up has similar information in business. And that's going to change things in a drastic way, I hope.
As a CEO, what advice would you give to business leaders and executives so that we can create and cultivate a culture where we invite perspectives from non-AI practitioners? You're an inventor, you've been in this space for decades, you're an expert. How do we invite the single contributors and lines of business that are not necessarily technologists to ensure we have a holistic approach in terms of what we develop? And, over time, there are going to be many, many more bullshit jobs that are going to get replaced. I have a 14-year-old son. I don't really know how to guide him in terms of what he should study in high school and college. I mean, obviously, I want him to continue to read and continue to write and continue to become self-aware and work on those soft skills that end up being really hard to teach. But 10 years ago, I would have advised him, follow your dad, electrical engineer, software developer, and I'm not really sure if that's right advice now. So how do we become more inclusive and invite a diverse set of opinions and expertise to make sure that we create something that's advances society in a meaningful way?
So one of the taglines that my co-author Phaedra Buenaderas has, and she's a trustworthy AI leader as well. And it's not a technical problem, it's a socio-technical problem, and AI is social software, and we have to have a much wider, I always call it like a vertical and horizontal stratification, so that you have more diverse neocortexes, more diverse thinking. And, we definitely can look back at our educational system that still gives children the summer off to work fields. Like we need to modernize. And, we don't need to spit out people who can get the right answer on tests. We need people who have the metacognition to be able to think through and use dialectics. I'm a, huge fan of, the understanding of how you can question things in a way that you can interrogate them. And I send my children to debate camps so that they can argue both sides of arguments and they understand what, a triangulated, source is. And I think that it's fascinating to me because when I interact with my 14-year-old, that next generation already knows. And, she's like, Mom, Snapchat put an AI on my thing. I named it and Curtis, and I don't like it because it answers too fast. And it, in this, she's referring to it as an it the entire time because, I've taught her how to interact with systems. And that does not mean that she does not get to say, she still needs to use her manners, because practicing manners, pleases, and thank yous are part of the glue that holds society together. But I think that if you think about like children in the millennials, they gave us, different labels that we could identify as, not just one thing. We can be non-binary. And what a world to explore, right? So kids, do you think that they're not going to grow up to just have one career, maybe two careers, maybe three? I won the lottery, Vala, with my parents who said, go to school for what you love. And
that is lottery.
I won the lottery. And that was like, and it took me 20 years to pay off my loans, and it sucked. But
same.
But if nothing else, I'm very fun in a dinner party. I have lots of conversations to talk about because I have a breadth of different types of things that you can think about and talk about. And I think that, maybe we will not be measuring things on quantity, maybe more quality in the future. And that's something that I think that children, what a world that they are going to inherit if we can figure out how to make sure to put some regulation in, make sure that the AI systems are explaining themselves, make sure that the intent by which those models are created are exposed, make sure that not like 4 people in the universe have access to, the kill switches. Like we have to have a less brittle system in general.
It's amazing. I can't speak in front of my 14-year-old without him fact checking me instantly. And it's often around sports. I'm like, he's the greatest 3-point shooter. And then a minute later, my son's like, well, according to whatever app is using, he's 3rd all-time scorer. And, so he fact checks everything I say. So now I now have to think a bit, pause a bit before I engage with him. My 21-year-old who's just finished her internship at Deloitte, and she's a university rising senior. And she's like, oh, Dad, I just got a compliment today. One of the managers said, it was great that I maintained eye contact while speaking with him. And I'm like, what? Like, really? Like post-COVID, our kids are learning to have conversations and maintain, that really gets a compliment. So I'm just saying that I live with digital natives. I'm a digital immigrant. I wasn't born mobile, social, cloud, and it's just the learning pattern, how they connect, how they engage. And it's vast. It's just changing. I suspect in our lifetime, are we going to experience, a human-led machine assist world to a machine-led human assist, where we have to really think about radical transparency and ethics and meaningful engagements, and making sure not only you belong to something, but you actually have sense of mattering as well. So anyway, it's great to have a CEO like yourself guiding these important conversations. Sorry, Ray, I'm talking about my kids. Go. I know you have questions.
No. I think it's important, right? I mean, along those lines, right? What we see is, the way AI is being developed, it's not necessarily including a lot of different voices, right? You end up with survivorship bias, and history is written by those the victors, right? And that's kind of where AI is headed in a lot of cases. And the question is, well, what happens in that moment, or how do we prevent that, or do we even prevent that, or even is it even possible to prevent that in terms of society? And so you kind of touch upon that, and kind of curious upon your viewpoints. Like what what's important, right? And how important is to include those diverse viewpoints and interdisciplinary knowledge, because sometimes some societies might not want that. So,
well, and it's I think that there's a really good question in how do you manage and take guardrails down, if you're going to program them. And so one of the things that I wanted to do with my company, and I practice the old school version of artificial intelligence, and that's natural language understanding. And in order to have natural language understanding, we have to have, what are you understanding it against? So all of my AI models and systems are built to augment people. And so I have to know, what user are you augmenting? What is the domain that we're talking about, so that we can use their data to be able to ground that to a context, and then everything is understood against that context. And so you are using old school abductive inference, which is logic. Something belongs to something else. And this is, I use ontologies and graph models, which is dates back to Tim Berners-Lee and the W3C standard, and, OWLs. And, I think that, what I have been doing is taking what I love from the past, remixing it and making it relevant. And so we just use black box generative AI to generate a variation, but we know what we're generating a variation of. We have source, we have lineage and provenance, we have full attribution, we have the literal audit trail, and we have the ability to do deterministic as well as indeterministic. And this is what I meant when I said I'm mixing semantics and statistics. We have to mix together and use the right tool for the right problem. And a lot of what we saw back in the day when we were trying to put chatbots into production, which, ask a data scientist how many models they actually get into production. It's a whole different ballgame when you're actually flowing data over models, and data's a flow, not an event. So when we were like doing these old school conversational AIs, like, I remember the day we would go around the IT shop and say, give me 50 variations of this question. Give me 50 variations of this answer. Now with generative AI, we don't need to ask IT people who don't know the business problems they're solving to give us variations. So it's the advent of generative AI is awesome for people like my team, who had already had a knowledge of how to do natural language understanding that is not just on our worldview. It's on anybody's worldview, because we can start to create those different contexts and then be able to see things that it blows my mind every day. So I think that AI can be done personally for each
Let me
human
add something
being.
a little bit here. I mean, we've gone from persuasive technologies, right, the ones that actually suck up our time and attention, to hopefully some level consensual technologies where we're able to have that conversation and direct it where it is, to having mindful technologies where we hope, it's a term one of my friends, Ari Kayumi, uses all the time, where we hope that the system is working for the individual, not the system. Right. And that level of control is going to be very interesting. Back to our point of centralized scarcity versus decentralized abundance. We're in that kind of that model. So sorry, Vala, back to you.
I was just writing, data is a flow, not an event. Super tweetable. Great great way of.
Excellent.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I love flow. Flow is all around us. We just find creative ways of disrupting it. So advice to I mean, you're focusing in various industries, healthcare, education. Advice to business leaders, advice to budget owning line of business executives that have their CEOs asking about, how are we using generative AI? How are we using natural language processing? How are we using computer visioning or smart robotics, depending on what industry you're in? It's certainly a boardroom topic. We now see CIOs have tremendous pressure answering questions in terms of the innovation roadmap that includes AI. What advice do you have to these line of business? How do they get in the game? Are they in the game? What are the obstacles? What are the challenges? how are you growing Bast to ensure that we get the best value we can, meaningful value we can from these emerging technologies?
I would say, stop trying to navigate an aircraft carrier in the age of drones. So,
Wow.
if you just think about this for a second, old school monolithic software used to have menus, and people are really tied to menus. Some of the first AI and some of the monolithic software is, what menu option do I do to do what? Guess what? Conversational AI or a natural language prompt blows that away totally. And you will no longer have these silos. You're not going to have HR, operations, marketing, sales, delivery. You're going to have stuff that's going to go across the board because it's a conversation, it's organic. And so don't let your executives be stubborn about getting their money's worth from some of these purchases that they may have made in order to amateurize. I would say go fast, experiment, put things in that make sense, and try to figure out how to get really familiar with what we should always be familiar with. What problem are you trying to solve? Is this problem worth solving? Is somebody going to pay you to solve the problem? Is this problem something that happens every day? Have you already tried to solve it in 16 different ways and you couldn't figure it out? Like, take the robot out of the human and start to automate the things that people don't want to do. And then be able to look at your entire situation and say, okay, this is how I applied AI to be able to make people have more time to do the things that matter, like therapeutic listening or building relationships, or in my case, talking about pickleball.
Beth, is experience a detriment? Can you really shift from aircraft to drone if you have legacy of doing the same sort of things for a long time? Can you unlearn and relearn? And
I hope so.
You hope so? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, but I think, like all of us, we've realized at one point or another, something we know to be true is not likely not, and if you've never had that realization, then maybe not. But once you have, you can start to think, and it's not like think outside the box. I think it's going back to the very first question you guys asked. How do we come from a mindset of abundance? How do we know what we have, not what we don't have? How do we know that this is an infinite game? This is not a zero-sum game. How do we not, how do we make my dream? How do we make corporations and companies come and say, Beth, I see you have a well-performing team. Here's what I've done to your employees' community. Here's how I've helped. Here's my resume. Like, I think we will be seeing that inversion sooner rather than later, because I think that the individuals who have the capability to patent, have the capability to build software, have the capability to do things with their hands, the plumbers, the teachers, the medics, the nurses, the construction workers, these are the people who will not be automated.
Nope.
So how do we make sure that we use AI to help augment them, because we need more of them?
That's great.
Hey, if you have the SOP, your job's about to get automated, but that's definitely true. I mean, when and where we insert a human is going to be the biggest question we ask of all time. And so I think that's something we're going to look at. You can get Beth's book. Please catch it. Of course, AI for the rest of us. And thanks for being on the show. We got Beth Rudden, CEO of Bast.ai. And more importantly, you can follow her on X at iBethRudden, Rudden.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Incredible leader, executive, and big brain. And we have mutual friend Phil Cremani who introduced us to Beth, and she's extraordinary. Speaking of extraordinary, our next guest, Elliott Parker, is founder and CEO of High Alpha Innovation, a venture builder that partners with corporations, universities, and entrepreneurs to co-create startups that solve compelling problems. Elliott built his career in strategy consulting at Innosight, the firm founded by Professor Clayton Christensen, in corporate venturing and as an entrepreneur, bringing new ideas to market. To date, Elliot has launched 40 venture-backed startups. That's incredible. 40 patents with our previous guest, 40 startups with our next guest. My goodness. Elliot is the author of The Illusion of Innovation, Escape, Efficiency, and Unleashing Radical Progress. You can follow Elliot on X at ER Parker, Parker. Welcome, Elliot, to Disrupt TV.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hey, we're excited to have you here, right? And there's a lot to be learned, especially in terms of what's going on, in terms of our ability to be better leaders and our ability to actually think in a different way, especially around innovation. But part of it is, you get there by what you measure, and you have a very interesting point. What do we have to do with the way we measure in order to actually be successful as companies? Because it seems like from your thesis, the old metrics no longer apply. And because the old metrics no longer apply, we're going to have to actually change what we measure in order to get to the outcome we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's right. It's, I think we all have a sense that our large institutions, whether they be corporations, governments, universities, all somehow seem less capable than they once were at solving big problems or in the face of change. We think of stories of 100 years ago, what people were able to get together and build and in short amount of time for very little money. Now it seems like everything takes forever. And when a crisis comes, we're kind of frozen in the face of it. And it's true, actually. And ironically, the reason why that is that we're actually better at managing our large institutions than we've ever been before. But they're optimized for the wrong things, as you point out. For example, with corporations, the way that we've decided we measure the success of corporations is metrics like return on invested capital, IRR, things that prioritize short-term focus on efficiency, capital efficiency at the expense of long-term resilience. I'll give you an example of this. We see in large corporations these elaborate supply chains that have been built up. In the book, in fact, I talk about the example of a company called Vallejo, a supplier in the auto.
Vallejo.
Amazing company. Prior to COVID, they had 191 factories around the world producing millions of parts every day. And you think about all that goes into that, the decades of careers and time and energy and smart people who made that system work incredibly efficient. But when one piece of it breaks, the whole thing comes crashing down. It was very efficient, but not very resilient. And I don't know. We just have to decide is what matters more. I'd argue that there should be more room for resilience, not just efficiency.
And have you noticed that we're stuck in this efficiency trap even more post-COVID? Whether it's margin pressure, EBITDA, profit. Certainly in the tech industry, last couple of years, the focus in terms of shareholder value. When did you first notice that there is an efficiency trap? And obviously, the bulk majority of the narrative around generative AI and AI in general is to squeeze more and be even more efficient and even be faster at machine scale. And
we don't need these humans.
Yeah, exactly.
So when did you notice it, and how do we get out of it?
Notice it early in my career. It's not a bad thing. My argument is just that we can overdo it, and we often do. I think back my first job out of school. I was working for a company called Arthur Andersen, trying to commercialize intellectual property, and that was a big company. Seemed like it was well run and safe, and it was. And within 6 weeks or so, pretty much, company went out of business because one part of that system got embroiled in the Enron scandal. The whole company came crashing down. And here I was in Los Angeles, another state, lost my job because of it, and got a very good lesson in the precariousness of these large institutions. So it's a challenge. If you go back to like the 1980s, 1990s, Jack Welch was running General Electric. I talk about this in the book. And he famously came out and said, variance is evil. What he meant by that is he was going to make everything as predictable as possible within General Electric. We're going to get rid of all error. We're going to make everything safe. We're going to be able to predict years down the road what's going to happen so that our results are steady and we can plan around it. A good intention. And he was a wonderful leader, but he was very, very wrong in saying that variance is evil, because what happens when you root out all error making from the system doesn't learn anymore. You're just doing what you've always done. You're doing it a little bit better. You don't learn about new ways of understanding the world. And as the world changes, you stay static. It doesn't work.
That's what a delicious paradox, because you would think that the mindset is driven by simplicity scales. So the more simple, the greater the scale, the greater the distribution, the less prone to error. But then you're not designing for instability. You have that rigidity built in because you don't accept variance, which means you don't have that beginner's mindset approach to problem solving, and you can have all these blind spots that accumulate over time. So I can argue both sides, and I can see how it could be so detrimental, and yet distribution is life. So you want to scale, and so you're always driving for more simplicity. So that balancing act is enormous. But yeah, that's
very hard. I mean, this is as you mentioned in the intro, I worked with Clayton Christensen a while back. That's the heart of the
Valena shake, the job to be done. Understanding the root cause of how to compete and win and grow. What an amazing privilege to be part of that learning environment. One of the greatest thinkers.
While we're on that topic, what is your favorite memory of God bless Clay? But what's your favorite memory of Clay Christensen?
It's hard to pick one favorite. I'll tell you one that sticks out. I remember years ago, I was working on a particularly tricky problem, and when I was stuck with something, sometimes I'd go over to his office and meet with Clay, or when he was in our office, he'd come over. And I say, "Here's the problem I'm working on," and most of the time, what he'd say is, "I'm glad you're working on that because I have no idea what the thing is." But here are some theories you might think about that might apply. He was so good at thinking about how to apply different theories. But I remember one time I had a meeting with him one morning, and I get a call from his assistant saying, "Hey, can we change things around? Can you come in a little bit later?" Yeah, of course. Happy to. I show up at his office that morning, and the reason that he had to move things around because his agenda that morning was he was meeting with the Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid at the time. His next meeting was Mike Bloomberg, who was the mayor of New York City, and then Elliott Parker. Okay. Yeah, he's operating in just a different realm.
You are great. What great company. What great company. Still one of my favorite books, How Will You Measure Your Life?
So good.
Of all the work, and it stemmed from an HBR article that is a beautiful book. And I had the privilege of meeting Professor Christensen on a number of events. One was even Salesforce event where we invited the professor to come speak to us. What a humble, what a kind, what a gentle soul. Just live the recommendable life. Live the recommendable life.
Giant of a man.
One of the best, and one of Clay's best, superpowers was really trying to help large, complex organizations figure out innovation and figure out how to get out of that, dilemma that everybody was in. So why? I mean, in your research, why are large institutions, including corporations, less capable, right, of delivering breakthrough change the way they once were able to do it? It seems like we've lost that spark of innovation. Is it fear? Is it stakeholders? Is it standardization on the variance? Like, what's driving that? Like, it's almost as if they're timid.
Yeah.
And please expand on the illusion of innovation. Like, what is that?
The illusion.
What does that mean?
Let me answer both of those. Yeah, the illusion is the idea that in all of our large organizations, we know innovation is important. And we feel like it's important to put a lot of energy and time into efforts that should drive innovation. And so we do this thing, we pursue these activities that more often than not only fail to produce innovation, but actually destroy value. If you think about, go back the last 30 years, the common approach to addressing innovation, business model innovation inside of corporations is to set up an innovation team, give them some budget, let them operate with a degree of independence, and say, okay, go come up with things that are going to help us transform our business.
We need an innovation center. We'll put it in Silicon Valley and everybody will move and then leave our company in 3 years. Yeah,
good boy.
An amazing approach.
You see it all the time, right? And I would argue that a lot of those groups have produced some really important innovations at the margins, and there's room for that. Most of the innovation we benefit from in the world is sustaining incremental innovation. It's really important. But most of those groups are set up to drive transformation. And I can't think of a single example of a corporation that is transformed because of the work of one of those teams. Yet everybody does it. And so that, for me, that's the illusion. It's the idea we feel compelled to. We have to do something. So this is what we're going to do, even though when you stand back and look at the data, it doesn't work. And so we need to do something different. The problem is these corporations, as they scaled up, they began as startups that were disruptive, that were doing new things. But as they scale, they develop systems of governance, how to make decisions, incentives, talent, processes that are optimized for preserving that scaled corporation, for preserving what has worked in the past. And the problem is that innovation requires learning. It requires making mistakes. And again, back to Jack Welch, if you're going to root out all the errors in the system, you're going to optimize for preservation. Ironically, it's going to produce the opposite result over time.
Are you saying shoot for 5 Sigma instead of 6 Sigma? Instead of a black belt, we're going to go brown belt.
Well, actually, it's a really interesting question, because you could say, well, if no error is bad, well, let's go the other direction. Chaos on the other end of the spectrum is also bad.
Yeah,
let's be clear on that. You've got to find the balance, and you can find, there are a lot of systems out there in the world where you can find balance, where innovation actually works really well naturally. And I think our organizations or corporations in particular could learn a lot more from those types of natural systems where innovation happens and resilience is the output.
I had just recently read how engineering, when it comes to like fighter pilots and how the military and defense purposely designed for instability. And so there's it's leading to further investments in improving decision dominance, and the SUDA, the sense, understand, decide, and act, is now designed at machine scale, where the time between sensing and acting is converging to 0, and how the military is using AI to achieve that level of responsiveness. But my question is, okay, I think I mentioned in the last segment that my 21-year-old, she's in business school. She just finished her internship at Deloitte. What advice, Elliot, should I be giving my daughter, who's going to graduate from a business school? And she just actually today I got a full-time offer from Deloitte, and she's likely to accept.
Amazing.
So she's going to join a large corporation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So business school, a great business school in Boston. She's attending Bentley University, and now potentially going to Deloitte. And now the thesis here is, listen, big companies need to do a better job of innovating, and they need to not have illusion of innovation. With the training that she's getting at school and work, what else can we add to her way of thinking and problem solving? They're asking for a friend.
Well, I've got kids in that same age bracket, and I'll tell you, if there's anything, it's the older they get, the less I realize I know. So I don't take this advice with a grain of salt, but I think there's number one, I think it's important to recognize, and this was in the last segment too, we are in an age of decentralization in some ways. In some ways, what I mean is that smaller teams and individuals are more empowered than ever before to do big things. Sure. Look at the average size of companies over time as one example. The number of employees in your average company is going down at a pretty steady clip. Now, to the point where if you draw the line out at some point, in theory, it flattens out at a 0, right? 1, maybe 0. We're running companies with.
Well, my AI bot has it all taken care of. There's no people here.
The average number of employees to produce $1 million of revenue in Fortune 500 companies in 1990, I think, was around 10, and now it's less than 2.
Yeah, isn't that remarkable?
And we're just starting in the AI revolution. So we're at less than 2 now. Fast forward 10 years from now.
It's
an
amazing time to be alive. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that if you're an individual entering the workforce right now, it's recognizing that small teams, individuals have a lot more power than they once did. Yeah. And this is what makes it harder for our large corporations to survive and innovate. If you look at corporations today, they have more money on their balance sheets than ever before on average, and yet they're going out of business faster than ever before.
Oh yeah.
Think about that.
Amazing.
There's an asymmetric advantage that's happening, right? Back to the point of $1 million Lockheed missiles versus $100 drones.
Yeah,
right. That's exactly an asymmetric advantage. You take UPI, which is payment gateway in India, which is a penny per transaction, versus $1.50 for ACH and $25 for SWIFT. That's an asymmetric advantage. I talked to my son's friends. They're all comp sci econ majors, and a lot of them dropped out. They're making $2 to $10 million on arbitrage just on their own, basically either buying shoes, sneakers, or tickets or restaurant reservations, and being able to have a bot book those faster and then put them into a marketplace. And that's how they're making money. And they're like, why do I go back to school? Right? That arbitrage is happening. You don't go back to school. They're off payroll for good.
It's funny you should say
vanity.
that. My oldest daughter, who's again 21, 3 years ago, 3 of her classmates decided to not to go to college, and they launched kind of a high-end sneaker business. They're multi-million. They're multimillionaires.
They're doing sneakers too on this one.
Multi-millionaires.
Yes, they're doing sneakers. They're getting $2 to $3 million a year on sneaker arbitrage.
Unbelievable. Anyway, sorry, that's not just.
That's not what the book is. But these guys will never be working for large companies, right?
Yeah. Nor should they. We don't want them to if they're that creative as individuals.
But I'm trying to foster innovation in a global 2000. What should I do?
Here's the thing. I mean, we need both types of organizations. We need those large corporations, right? We're talking to each other on laptops right now that were built by corporations. A startup team can't do that.
No.
So you need both. The important thing is you have to recognize what each is good for. And the problem with corporations right now is they're managing them thinking that they can be good at the learning that startups do. I hear CEOs of these large companies say, we just need to act more like a startup.
If only.
What a terrible idea. Most startups go out of business. First of all, no, you don't. We don't want your corporation to run like a startup. We want it to run like a well-run corporation, but you have to find ways, systems outside the corporation often, where you can drive some of that transformative innovation with new ways of governance and incentives and talent sometimes, and processes that are designed to go learn and make mistakes.
Well, in your book, you talk about a really, really bizarre to me at the time until I read it, example about the Federal Witness Protection Program being an awesome decentralized model. Explain how I'm sure it's decentralized for a reason, like you won't figure out where anyone lives, but like how does that work, and how can a corporation learn from, the witness program that I might have been part of one day? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, witness protection program is, I use that in the book just as an example of a form of innovation. You don't think about the government being innovative very often, but here was a program that's actually been incredibly successful in terms of its putting bad guys away. It's brought down organized crime in every major city in the United States. And the reason I pointed that out is that system, it was founded back in the 1960s, and by a guy who was kind of given the freedom to do what he wanted. And
in the government,
fiefdom within the government, right? So here's the thing: it's almost impossible to imagine something like that happening today. And yet, you look at the results of that; it's incredibly beneficial. We want more things like that, but it won't happen in the way that we run. We're too good at running our large organizations. We don't allow for that type of chaos, that type of fertility. Our big organizations are too sterile now, and it's a real problem.
That's amazing.
In the old days, oh, sorry, Val, go ahead. So,
no, go ahead. If you want to finish your thought.
In the old days, right, we looked at innovation as there's incremental innovation, right? And that's people make those few changes. There's some level of like transformational innovation that was going to occur, right? And then we had like these just crazy wild ass idea teams, right? They're on the farthest edge, right? And we saw different types of organizations, like Walmart had Walmart and then Walmart Labs, right? And they separated them, then they tried to bring them back and integrate, and it was kind of hard. The cultures were different. A lot of organizations had that kind of scenario. So where am I supposed to find innovation in a large company if I'm not building an innovation team? I can't think and reward innovation. My shareholders don't, enjoy me putting some points on margin to actually go be innovative and wait for like 5 to 10 years because I have a short-term mindset. Like, are we just doomed to not have any innovation in large companies? All they should do is just do it through M&A and BD.
Yeah, boy, I sure hope not. I don't think so. And that's why I wrote the book, because I do think these organizations can be innovative, but they have to reclaim it. We have to figure out a way to do it in a world where things are increasingly decentralized. The old model, you go back to the 1950s with Bell Labs, great example, centralized R&D, pulling the smartest people onto a small team inside of one company, and you can create the next century of electronics innovation found its root in the work that was done there. You just don't see that happen anymore. Things are too decentralized. Individuals, as mentioned, have more power, access to ideas, access to capital that just didn't exist before. So it's a different ecosystem in which these corporations are playing. The problem is most executives haven't changed their tactics. And so the way that we think about it in my company when we're doing things. We look at if there's a problem that we identify in a market or an opportunity, we'll ask ourselves, is that an execution problem or a learning problem? What I mean by that, execution problem, we see the problem, we know what we need to do, we just need to go do it. Corporations can do that extraordinarily well. They're optimized for execution.
Execution at scale.
Learning problems, that's where startups win and beat corporations almost every time, where there's a problem and we're not quite sure how to solve it. It's pretty ambiguous. We got to go try a lot of things and figure it out. In corporations, the frequency of correctness matters more than the magnitude. It means if you're an executive in a corporation, it doesn't matter how right you are, just don't ever be wrong. In a startup, it's the magnitude of correctness that matters, not the frequency. You can be wrong all the time because when you're right, it's really going to pay off. And that's the difference. We confuse inside of both organizations, both small startups and large corporations, by the way. We make the mistake of thinking that we are a corporation good at learning or a startup good at executing, and need to recognize where the strengths are and lean into those.
Is that different teams?
It is. I think for a corporation is optimized again for that incremental type of innovation, especially the innovation that drives more efficiency.
Okay.
That type of breakthrough, that innovation that challenges the core business model in some way, can rarely be done inside the corporation. There are examples of it, but it's often you still have the founder running the business. The company's facing some type of existential threat. For most of those companies, they're kind of in the middle. Founder's not there anymore. Company's doing okay. Almost impossible to innovate in a way that transforms. And so you have to do that outside with new forms of governance and incentives, talent.
So this is the middle aging out that we see at Intel, right? I mean, that we've seen at HP, that we've seen at other companies that turn 30 to 40 years old. They just don't know how to go there.
Yeah.
So
Good observation.
Sitting on, we see it in the stock market broadly right now, right? You see more share buybacks than ever before in history.
It's brutal.
And there are good reasons for share buybacks sometimes, but when you look at the scale of what's going on, it's almost it's like corporate America is raising the white flag, saying we're just going to give money back because we think the market can do it better.
Pay me a dividend. It's much easier.
Elliot, I am dialing in from Boston. I'm a Bostonian, lived in the Boston area most of my life. So when you asked me who's the best three-point shooter of all time in the NBA, very often my answer for most of my life was Larry Bird. Greatest three-point shooter of all time.
Yep.
I would ignore Reggie Miller. Even when Ray Allen joined the Celtics and broke the three-point record, I would still say Larry Bird. But I have to admit, if you follow basketball long enough, the greatest three-point shooter of all time is Steph Curry. And if you've been watching the Olympics, obviously the men's basketball team heavily favored. Yet yesterday they were playing Serbia in the semifinals, down by 17 at one point, down by 11 in the fourth quarter. And this guy, the shortest athlete on the team, Steph Curry, scores 36 points. The greatest performance I've ever seen on a basketball Olympic event, maybe basketball in general, because the amount of pressure and how he single-handedly took us to the gold match tomorrow. Yeah, against Spain. Yeah, my son right now would be fact checking. Was that the greatest three-point performance? I think it was. What can businesses learn from Steph Curry in terms of running their companies?
Yeah, good question. And I grew up a Lakers fan with an intense hatred of the Celtics. I lived in Boston. I've come around.
Abdul-Jabbar.
Exactly.
James Worthy, Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
Dennis.
Yeah.
All of them.
No rivalry there up between the coasts.
No.
What we see in companies, I often get asked the question, well, if the solution to the innovator's dilemma is we just need to run more experiments, fast, cheap, and weird. Let's go do more of those. We talked earlier, the opposite of sterility is chaos. Well, that's not good either. So what matters more? We can't just go off and tell everyone, just run as many experiments as you can and see what happens. That's not a good strategy. That's going to lead to failure too. And so it comes down to, well, what matters more, the quantity or the quality of the experiments we're running? Most corporations, when they think about innovation, are centralizing that innovation. They're choosing to put a lot of dollars into very few things and seeing that all the way through. And the results, whether it fails or succeeds, is expensive. In the NBA, you see that the teams that win are the teams that take a lot of shots, take the most shots actually, and they take them very strategically. The 3-point rule put in place in 1979 showed us that the game's totally changed over time, right? Now you have most shots taken right under the net and right beyond the 3-point line. You look at our corporations, they're doing the equivalent of taking shots just under the net far too often. Need to be going beyond the 3-point line a little bit more. It's quality. Take more shots and take them more strategically.
Elliot, this is how the Celtics won their 18th championship.
The who?
The number of 3-pointers that the team took was first in the NBA, as you know, and clearly in the playoffs. And they, 4-1, 4-1, 4-1. I mean, they literally swept their way to the finals. Was because the number of 3-point shots that they took.
Yeah,
they were clearly not under the basket team all season. The best record. I'm just dunking on Elliot. At this point, it's just
I'll save Elliot here. Yeah, but hey, this has been wonderful, and I think the analogies you've used here are really helpful. A lot of organizations are trying to figure out why they can't figure out innovation, especially given the cost pressure, ownership by PE firms, which are really focused on short-term results, and the inability to actually have a long-term mindset. And I think what you've done here is really help people rethink what are the first principles around innovation and what types of organizations are geared up for innovation versus geared up for efficiency. And I think this was very, very helpful. So thank you so much for being on the show.
You're my favorite Laker fan guest we've ever had on the show.
Category of one. I love it.
We're here with Elliott Parker, CEO and founder of Venture Builder, High Alpha Innovation, and author of The Illusion of Innovation,
Awesome.
Escape Efficiency, and Unleash Radical Progress. You can follow him on X at ER Parker. Thanks for being on the show. We see you back in the green room.
Thank you so much. Terrific. Ray, there's literally smoke coming out of my ears. It's not fair to have folks like Beth and Elliot compressed to an hour because we clearly could have talked to both of them for the entire segment. I can't keep up. You see how many times I was taking notes? Both of them are so tweetable. Xable? I can't say Xable. Tweetable. I have a page and a half of things that I'm going to share after the show stemming from the shared wisdom of Beth and Elliot. Do us a favor, try to summarize what we learned in 30 seconds if you could.
Oh my God, it's the hardest part of the business here. But I think really it's important AI, right? AI can be done, and back to some of the themes that we've been talking about. You've heard me say this before at Davos. We're living in an era where we have to choose between the culture of scarcity and a culture of abundance, with the leap between centralized and decentralized systems. And when we live with centralized scarcity, and really where AI is headed at this moment, it looks like it's centralized scarcity instead of decentralized abundance. What we're going to find is the systems may be working against us. If you want to avoid that problem, you have to think about how you design AI to actually solve for the broader group, solve for the individual, and not be optimized by centralized authorities, because you don't know who's controlling you at that point if you don't have any access to that level of transparency and ethical design. And so this is going to be a big challenge, because when we look at risks of AI, this is one of the biggest risks, that high level centralization. I mean, if I was the not a benevolent dictator of a small country, I would be looking towards these types of technologies, right? They're awesome. They control folks. They manipulate information. They actually favor things in ways that I want them to be designed. But that's not what the Western world is about. And so I think that's a very, very important point. When we got to this point around innovation, I mean, this is a problem that we've been looking at for a while. And what Elliot's talking about here is that age-old problem, right? Do I go for the short-term gain, get promoted, and get my bonus as a CEO? Or do I build a business that's going to last the years, that lasts for the long term with a series of hits as opposed to one-hit wonders? And I think that's one of the things that corporations are struggling with, and they're going to keep struggling because they don't have the ramp-up time. Right? CEOs used to last 5 years. They used to last 4 years. We're down to about 3 years. If you got a team in there, you've got 3 years to figure this out. You don't have a lot of time to figure out innovation. And so this is why I was hinting at it. It sounds like, large corporations may have to find a mix of like small teams, M&A strategy for small things, acqui-hires, ability to bring those in. And they might come back in the pharmaceutical market, kind of like where large pharma, at a time there was like 50 pharmaceutical companies. We came down to like 12. Everybody left to do innovation at a biotech company because that was the hot thing. And the pharma companies had nothing. So they ended up buying all the biotech companies at the same valuation of their companies to get to that level of innovation. And then all those people left again, joined therapeutics companies to do that again. We saw that in enterprise software, right? we got the large companies, they ended up with suites. Then we got the smaller companies that product features, and now we're down to like I don't know, some about a little feature, like not even a set of product features for the same valuation, because we can't seem to get that innovation engine going. So I think there's a lot of great lessons learned there.
Is Eli Lilly going to be the first $1 trillion company in that sector? That's pretty amazing to see.
The off-label uses for like, GLP-1s are actually pretty cool if we want to go there. But yeah, they are pretty cool, right? I mean, you're better off as a healthy senior and individual on those. Your life will actually be extended as opposed to just the weight loss implications of a GLP-1. But so we're not going there.
No, we're not. Listen, I love the equation of impact of correctness needs to be more valued than frequency of correctness. I thought that was awesome. Take more 3-pointers if you can. Anyway, that's how the Celtics won 18, which is the most championships of all teams in the history of NBA. If Elliott's
all right,
still
now
watching.
you're still talking.
You can't get me going with Celtics. Next week, Chris Morgan, AVP Product Innovation at Zanzibar, will be here.
Yeah.
Mo Bunnell, author of Give to Grow, Invest in Relationships to Build Your Business and Your Career. And lastly, Dominic Ashley Timms and Laura Ashley Timms, who are the co-authors of The Answer is a Question.
Ooh, I can't wait to see that.
Thank you for watching. If it's Friday at DisrupTV, we look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye, everyone.
See you guys. See you in the green room. Oh, let's go.